This is the story of unintended consequences and the concept of a SUD, a seemingly unimportant decision. So, my first real opportunity in tech, I was placed with a huge accounting firm by an agency, and the agency that placed me with the firm, they billed the client $60 an hour for me because that's the consultant's rate for what I was doing. But because the agency placed me, I would be sharing the hourly rate with them. And the way they chose to share the rate with me was to give me $35 an hour for that job. If I had contracted with the company directly as a consultant, I would have been entitled to $60 per hour. But because the agency placed me, they were entitled to a share of the $60 per hour, and they paid me 35 and they kept 25. That was a completely unjust deal. That was completely crazy. The most they're supposed to accept really is about 20%. So they were really taking advantage of me. Um, and and I knew that they were taking advantage of me, but I really wanted the opportunity, so I agreed to it. I wouldn't say that I regret it, but I should have asserted. I should have asserted. I should have asserted. I believe I should have asserted. Who knows? It's possible that if I had asserted at that time, I wouldn't have had a career at all. Because he might have been like, I have other consultants who can do this job, who would be happy to have the 35. Are you sure you want to say no? Because I interviewed for that job and everything. Like basically, they needed a consultant. The story of that job is that the guy, it was a huge consulting firm. There was a guy that was hired there that was working there. He knew some of the technology that they needed for that particular project, but he was already a full-time employee and he already had a full-time work schedule of things that he needed to do, and what they needed was something they needed right away, and he didn't have enough time in the day to do it. So he told his manager, look, I don't have time to do all the things that I'm assigned to do and to do this. We need a consultant to do that, because that's actually, he had the basic skills to do that, but he was like, that's not what I do. Like, I like that stuff and I'm interested in learning that, but that's not my job, right? And I don't have time to devote to it. So if you need that to, basically, if you need to launch that, and they were on a really tight schedule, he was like, we need to get a consultant in here to do that, and it needs to be somebody who knows what they're doing. All right, it needs to be somebody who knows what they're doing. So his manager agreed, and they requisitioned the monies to hire the consultant. They reached out to the agency and said, we need somebody who knows how to do this. Like, we need somebody who knows this backwards and like, well, God forbid, blame not. But basically, we need somebody who knows what they're doing. We need somebody who codes by hand. So of course the agency said, yeah, we have lots of really capable people, blah 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 da, 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 da. He was like, he said that he looked for a resume that would work, and he saw my resume, and I specifically said I code by hand, right? And I do, to this day I code by hand, right? I don't use software or anything like that. I code by hand to this day, right? That's what I do. So that's what my resume said. So he called me and he said they need such and such. Can you do that? I said, yeah. He said, really? You can do that? I said, yeah, I know how to do that. He was like, really? I was like, yeah, yeah. That's why it's on my resume. That's the reason it's on my resume. Because I know how to do that. And he's like, okay, well they want to hire, so they want to meet you, because you'll be working with them for as long as it takes to complete that task. And I said, okay. And I went to the interview and met the guy. He and I talked. He was like, do you know how to do this? Can you do that? I said, yeah, I know how to do that. And he said, okay, well, I feel comfortable with you. Like, we'll be working closely together. I said, okay. And I remember that when I was working there, I was really enjoying it. And at the time, it was the most money that I'd ever made, really. Like, it was my highest hourly rate that I'd ever made professionally at that time. Although they were completely underpaying me, that was the most I had ever made at that time. And I remember there was this one day when something was going on with his code, and he was someone who was interested in web stuff, but he didn't really know a lot about it. He would utilize something called front page, and he was working on something with front page, and he knew a little bit about HTML, so sometimes he would make edits himself, and he made some kind of edit that screwed up the code, and he had unbalanced wackiness going on in his code that was screwing up the page, and he was really upset because he'd done a lot of work already. And like, sometimes the way that HTML is that the issue doesn't really like present itself until it's really unbalanced, and like one screwed up thing could really unbalance everything after you've done a lot of work, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't make sense anymore. So he said there's something in there that's wonky because he had edited the code himself, and he couldn't find it, and he needed to find it. Like, basically he had a certain amount of time that he needed to complete it, and he couldn't find it. So he was like, can you help me look at this and figure it out? So we were looking at it together. I said, yeah, I can find it for you. So but the only way to find it was by hand, because front page is so intrusive. And this was like in 1998. So front page is so intrusive when it comes to HTML code that you wouldn't be able to find it any other way. At least at that time, that version of front page was really intrusive and made a lot of assumptions. So you wouldn't be able to figure out if you had edited some of the code by hand, you would never be able to backtrack and figure it out with front page, because it would just be bonkers. It would just be like crazy. So I looked at it in the HTML view of it, and I literally looked at the code line by line, and sort of like made some educated guesses as to where I should look for what I was looking for, and I found it. I don't know, I guess some people would say, well, don't you feel as though you were able to get a lot for that $35 an hour? Like, as a result of accepting the $35 an hour, you were able to, parlay that into a full-time job at Amazon.com. You were able to parlay that into your own business. You were able to, pay off a certain amount of your student debt so that you could actually go back to school and complete your degree. Don't you feel as though accepting that $35 an hour was helpful to you? It just seems like that $35 an hour choice that I made when I accepted that, it seemed like it's always been something really sort of missing. And maybe that what was missing from that was that other $15. I mean, that I I really think that consulting firm really ought have only at most accepted 20% or no more than $15 from me for that placement that they did, um, and that my agreeing to that contract is something that basically put me on a trajectory to always being underpaid, but grossly, but grossly. That was gross. What he did was that was awful. That was gross.